Everyone's going to have this one circled. Carter Starocci versus Kyle Dake. Yeah, and that's not the only headline type of matchup that's going down this weekend at the World Team Trials.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are locked on to Penn State Wrestling. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Sako, and I am your host of the #1 Penn State sports podcast out there, going into year 4 with Locked On credentialed Penn State media member. He is the voice of Penn State Wrestling. That is Jeff Byers, and we are previewing the World Team Trials, the potential headline matchup of Carter Starocci versus Kyle Dake. Training partners in the mat room could be enemies this weekend. We could see part 2 of Dean Hamiti, Levi Haines, Jacob Cardenas versus Josh Barr at 92 kilos. There are a lot of 65 kilos is insanely loaded too. So we're going to go through the weight classes that have Penn State wrestlers or Penn State affiliated wrestlers, starting with Carter Starocci and Kyle Dake. Now, that one is not guaranteed to happen, but if it would be, this is the match that everybody would want to see because it's a glimpse into the Penn State wrestling room there, Jeff. What is the likelihood that this happens? And I mean, Starocci, Kyle Dake, it's the past and the present, sort of, or I guess a passing of a baton, if you will, if Starocci decides to go this route, no matter the result here. Dake versus Starocci, how much do you anticipate this one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as somebody that is following the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club and supporting the club, that's the matchup you're hoping to see. Yes, Kyle Dake, I mean, his place in wrestling history is already secure, and it is a very high place in wrestling history. His name is going to be forever remembered in USA Wrestling for his accomplishments both in college and on the international scene. And he's just been such a great representative of the wrestling community. He's just, it's hard to say or find anything negative to say about him. He just has been a tremendous ambassador and has really embraced himself in the State College area wrestling community, he and his family. So I think that's neat. And obviously Carter Starocci has etched himself a very special place already in wrestling history, but he's looking to make a name for himself here on the international stage. The two obviously are very familiar with one another, and I do think it's an interesting matchup of styles. They both, I think sometimes people think I'm being smart alecky when it's, what do you think Carter Starocci is best known for? And he's a great top wrestler. He is terrific with his single leg. And he's got a lot of great moves, but what he's best known for is winning. Well, that's what Kyle Dake is best known for. Kyle Dake just finds a way to get it done. And he's really tough to score on, as is Carter Starocci. So, Starocci, if the seeds go as expected, Starocci probably has to get past Marsteller. Chance Marsteller, to me, is just one of the all-time great redemption stories in wrestling. And it's hard not to be rooting for that guy just in life in general. And, it's just, I love every time I watch him compete because, that's a guy that was on the brink of really truly losing his life. Again, what he has done to get it back together and now, fully has immersed himself back in top wrestling form here for the last, nearly a decade is just impressive stuff. And, I do want to acknowledge just his greatness and what he has meant to the sport and what his story can mean for a lot of people going through different struggles out there. That being said, I think he will, although it's certainly not a given. Marsteller obviously beat him last time they met. That's part of why I think, though, this time around, Starocci, in my mind, is a very slight favorite. I think he is motivated by those losses in a unique way. And I also just think Carter continues to learn and is on the upswing. I think Chance, much like Kyle Dake, I mean, they're working their way toward the end of the career, and I'm not sitting here telling you that this is it for either of them. I think they both are planning on competing at least a couple of more years, but clearly toward the end of their careers, while Carter on the freestyle stage is just ready to blossom. So I do think it'll be, if we do see that Starocci-Dake matchup, I think it'll be a fascinating match in a lot of different ways. And I think it's a really hard one to handicap because there's no question Dake has the experience edge and is just a phenomenal wrestler. But Father Time remains undefeated, as they say. And again, I'm not sitting here telling you Kyle Dake can't be the guy for the next several years yet. But we saw some signs already this year that he's not quite the same wrestler. And I think part of it is,
well, he bumped up 2 weight classes, and that was going to be my follow-up, is he still going to, because against Zahid Valencia, that's one thing, but now that you get to do it and go up against that elite caliber competition, you can adjust and kind of change your game. And that applies now to anybody that he would face, Marsteller, Kakaisen, or Starocci, that Kyle Dake got to test the waters and say, okay, this is what I am at 86 kilos when I go up against the likes of Valencia, and there's not that much that separates any of these other names.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you combine the weight class jump, and David Taylor talked about it when he also has a family, that there's other obligations. Now, these guys are remarkable. I mean, like, truly outstanding when it comes to time management. And hey, this is the time for the family. This is the time for wrestling, and they know what they're doing. But it is just different. Like Carter Starocci, his focus, I mean, his sole focus is, I want to be a world champion. I want to win these matches. I want to become an Olympic champion, and then above and beyond. And that is, now with school out of the way, my term there, I mean, that is his sole focus. Kyle is very focused when he's wrestling on wrestling, but very focused on his family, rightfully so, when he's with his family. Starocci, again, it is, I'm slightly overstating it, but it's pretty much a 24/7 pursuit for him right now. Now, that being said, again, you're not wrestling 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's the, what you're doing with the time in the room. And I suspect they're training very similarly, both in terms of hours spent and the quality of those hours spent. But I just think it's a little different when you don't have the distractions, and they are welcome distractions. I'm glad he has them, but you do have other obligations once you have a family. So that match, if we do see it, it's fascinating to me. And I just think as a wrestling fan, you ought to sit back and enjoy it. And we'll see what the outcome is. I've played it out in my mind a little bit, and they're, depending on the minute of the day and the day of the week, I can convince myself that, Dake's just a little too much at this stage. And I can also convince myself that, Starocci's just a little too much now, that this is where his focus is. So it'll be fun to watch if we do get to see it.
Hi, everyone. I don't mean to interrupt the podcast, but as some of you, probably most of you, can tell, this show was recorded before the official pre-seeds were released. And an unfortunate disclaimer here, Nick Lee is not part of the World Team Trials. For an unknown reason, he has withdrawn from this weekend. So with that being said, the disclaimer is the next 5 minutes plus of this conversation are devoted to Nick Lee and analyzing what his performance would be as a coach, balancing that competition aspect. It's a really insightful conversation. It is worthwhile to listen to with what Jeff talks about how Nick Lee has actually gotten better as a competitor because of the coaching aspect, but not really relevant to this weekend anymore since Nick Lee withdrew his name. Feel free to enjoy this part of the conversation. If you'd like to skip ahead, I will put a timestamp for you to jump ahead what is more relevant for this weekend. Thank you for understanding. 65 kilos. I mean, we have plenty of other wrestlers to cover. 65 kilos is going to be a roulette wheel with all of the names that are entered. For Penn State, Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, Nick Lee, Coach Nick Lee is going to be there. The future, Marcus Blaze, is entered into this bracket at the senior level as well. And don't forget about Bo Bartlett. These are just the Penn State names that have to go up against the likes of Jesse Mendez, Seth Gross, Bo Bassett's even here. We're going to talk about it more. Plus, Haines potentially meeting Hamiti again. Barr versus Cardenas. That is all coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. This episode is brought to you by WayFair. Days are getting longer, the weather's warming up, and people are spending more time outside, which means it's the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with the big backyard or a small balcony, WayFair has everything you need to make it feel more like you. WayFair's massive selection of outdoor essentials makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation sets to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all, and at prices that will fit your budget. Ordering furniture can be a hassle, not with Wayfair. Delivery is free, and it's hassle-free even for bigger items, bigger products. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online. This summer, get outside with Wayfair. Head over to wayfair.com right now. That's WayFair.com. Wayfair.com. Wayfair. Every style, every home. Plenty to talk about here at 65 kilos, as everybody and their brother seems entered into this bracket, because 61 kilograms, well, you have no possible way to get there, as Final X is taken up with Vita Arujá, who was waiting there. And then, wow, the weekend that Jax Forrest had, committed to Oklahoma State. High school prospect in the class of 2026 wins at the senior level now. And we could have seen Forrest and Blaze. We were that close to seeing Forrest versus Blaze, but that's in the past. Let's talk about the not too distant future here. Bo Bartlett, Marcus Blaze, all entered in for Penn State Nittany Lion Wrestling Club affiliated wrestlers. But then it's also Jesse Mendez is here. Seth Gross was very close to defeating Jax Forrest until Forrest ultimately took over that match. Bo Bassett's coming up from U20 and is going to wrestle in the senior level here. Another intriguing prospect in the likes of Aiden Valencia. And oh, don't forget about these names: Real Woods, Brock Hardy. I am the most excited about this one just for an entertainment perspective. Nick Lee projects as the #1 pre-seed, which would be, I mean, he's been coaching. So, Jeff, do you buy to the fact that, hey, Nick Lee should be considered the favorite here? Would he be the odds-on favorite to reach Final X at 65?
Yeah, it's interesting, Zach, because it's in some ways, I think he should be the guy, but partly because of his credentials. But more so, I do think when you're at the stage of the coaching career that Nick is, and where he is still obviously a tremendous athlete and in tremendous shape, I do think sometimes adding that coaching component can be a real benefit for him, in that
the teacher versus the student.
Yeah, and he is spending a lot of time working with these guys, breaking down films. Well, just as a coach, analyzing stuff, right? You're understanding. All right, well, this is what I think will work against this guy. This is what I think you need to be wary of. And as you go through that, and you're working through it with your guys, right? There's just a natural process of, well, if I ever wrestle that guy, this is what I would need to do. And Nick is just a unique athlete, brings a unique mindset, I think, as a competitor. And he wrestles with that fearlessness. He will go for it. And I think in this weight class, I think what you're going to see at the trials is the guys that go for it are going to get rewarded heavily. And I think it's hard to go for it when you're working through the caliber of opponents that are out there in this weight class. It's it's one thing to tell yourself, all right, I'm going to go for it. It's another to really create an opportunity, which is what you're going to have to do. I mean, if you look at, Flow Wrestling had their projected seeds, and I think they're probably pretty close. I mean, Bo Bartlett is an outstanding wrestler if you haven't been paying attention. And probably better as a freestyle wrestler than he was as a folk style wrestler. And again, he was outstanding, 3-time All-American, 2-time third place finisher, and a runner-up as a folk style.
It was just Jesse Mendez. It wasn't a Bo Bartlett thing. It was a Jesse Mendez thing.
There though is an 8 seed, and 8, to give you an idea of the depth in this weight class. I mean, that tells you that it is just a loaded weight class. And I just think you're going to have a bunch of matches that are just decided by a point or even criteria. And it's going to be fun to watch if you're a wrestling fan. There's probably 7 or 8 guys that I would tell you I would not be shocked if at the end of the day they were the guy that won the trials here. I do like Nick Lee's chances. I will say. I just I think he's been a good analytical wrestling mind all along. I think it's only been enhanced with the coaching element, and I think sometimes getting a little bit of a fresh start. And again, he's been obviously working in the room against outstanding competition on a regular basis, but getting that break from the outside competition, I think makes it a little more difficult for the outside competition to know, all right, well, this is what Nick Lee feels like and looks like now. And I also, again, think he has a very good handle on what the rest of the class has been doing there. So, but it'll be a fun weight class to watch.
Fun doesn't even begin to describe it. I mean, so if the pre-seeds are correct, and I'm going to trust Flow Wrestling here, we could see Nick Lee versus Bo Bartlett in a quarterfinal. We could see Nick Lee versus Marcus Blaze in a semifinal. We could see Marcus Blaze and Bo Bassett in a head-to-head matchup in order to get to Nick Lee. And then whichever, and I think you're almost not all but guaranteed, but Nick Lee or Marcus Blaze or Bo Bartlett, Bo Bartlett, excuse me, there is going to be Penn State Nittany Lion Wrestling Club representation for that World Team Trials final against most likely either of, I'm not picking against Jesse Mendez or Seth Gross. That one's a toss-up to me. I'm probably going to lean Mendez here with what I've said in the past.
Yeah.
But you're going to get a Penn State affiliated wrestler versus either of Mendez or Gross.
Yeah. I just I think the weight class is just going to be a whole lot of fun to watch. And, and Marcus Blaze is just one of those guys, Zach. It's just like every time I see him, like I cannot believe that this guy is this good at this stage of his wrestling career.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, you're saying that about a lot of these guys that are in high school. Obviously, Jax Forrest, we talked about Bo Bassett. You go right down the list. PJ Duke, obviously, is another phenom. It really is beyond incredible to me, the number of high school kids that are making an impact at the senior level right now for USA Wrestling.
Well, you mentioned PJ Duke. That's who I was going to pivot to next. He would be according to Flow Wrestling, the second pre-seed. So he's not exactly the favorite, but he's certainly going to be one of the favorable wrestlers in this bracket. Would have to go through the likes of potentially an Ian Parker. Could he meet maybe a Bryce Andonian or a Ridge Lovett or an Antrell Taylor? So those are guys that the two guys that I just named won NCAA titles, and PJ Duke could be wrestling either one of them at some point in this bracket. James Green would be projected as the number 1 overall seed. Jeff, in your mind, is PJ Duke the one that's not going to disrupt this, but should he be considered the odds-on favorite as somebody that just won a U20 U.S. Open title?
Yeah, the way he is wrestling right now, Zach, it's hard for me to bet against him. Obviously, again, this is another one where now PJ is really young. I mean, we were talking about Carter and Dake, but James Green is not green when it comes to freestyle wrestling. That is for sure. But PJ Duke is, and again, I know we say this about a lot of these guys, but he looks as a wrestler so poised,
like
so
he's been doing this for a long time.
Yeah, and just dominant. I mean, it's not that he's just going out there and winning, which is impressive enough against college guys or guys that are even out of college. It's the way he does it. And the confidence that he brings, and it's not false bravado. It's a confidence that's earned. But the skill level that these guys possess, along with again the strength and everything else that you need to go out and be highly competitive in this sport, it's really hard for me to get my mind around. And I know that it's a credit to the kids, obviously, and the opportunities that these guys have now, and they're competing at very high levels from very young ages and getting exposed to top level wrestling. And I get all of that. It is still just, it is hard for me to wrap my head around a high school kid being able to be competitive, let alone beat some of the guys that, the PJ Dukes and the Marcus Blazes of the world are doing at this stage of their careers.
79 kilos, 92 kilos. That's where we could see rematches from NCAAs, whether that's Dean Hamiti and Levi Haines or Josh Barr and Jacob Cardenas. And I'm really excited for what 92 kilograms holds between Barr, Cardenas, Sinclair, Dustin Plott's in there as well. So we got a lot to break down. Plus Aaron Brooks, Greg Kerkvliet are not at this. Why aren't they entered in? We're going to discuss that all coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. I think it's fitting to go in order of weight classes going up the scale here. So 79 kilos, Dean Hamiti versus Levi Haines. And based on the precedes from Flow Wrestling, Hamiti would be number 1, Haines would be number 2. So, okay, is this a crash course going into the final? The question that pops in my mind is Hamiti is going to be the favorite because we saw it at NCAAs and how it was a struggle for Haines to get to his shots, or he couldn't finish his shot attempts. Hamiti had really good defense because of the length, because of the build he has as a wrestler. So it's just his God-given ability there at that point in time, because Haines was aggressive, but just could never finish that shot attempt. So, Jeff, when you look at it, what adjustments can Haines make to get past that, to say, okay, I'm going to be able to work around a size advantage that Hamiti has?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it's the two kids, but I do think the intriguing backstory here is the coaches. And I don't think there's any question David Taylor knows Levi Haines as well as any opposing coach
connection
could possibly know a wrestler. And I think it factored in. I mean, Dean Hamiti was obviously very well prepared for Levi Haines. And, that being said, I do think the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club coaches look at that match and will have Levi more than ready to go, and Levi will be ready to go. I think Dean Hamiti was an underrated wrestler throughout the course of the season
and his career,
and probably by me as well. I'm not sitting here telling you, no, I knew all along Dean Hamiti was the guy. I thought Levi Haines was the guy all season long, even with his loss to O'Toole, and I thought those two were were the two guys that were there. But I did always say, and you can't discount Dean Hamiti. But at the end of the day, I did think it would be O'Toole and Haines, and I thought Haines would ultimately come out on top. I still think Haines is the best wrestler there, and I think Levi will win the World Team Trials. But you got to go out and do it. Hamiti is obviously outstanding and really tough to score on. And the one of the common themes, I should say, not the one, but a common theme here with the world team is you need top level defense. I mean, the guys that are successful. Yep, you need the offense. You need to be able to put points on for sure. But the guys that are consistently there, winning world titles, winning gold medals at the Olympics, you know how to avoid being taken down. And Levi obviously is very good at that too, but Hamiti is exceptionally good at it. I do think Levi, I don't know what specific adjustments he's going to make, but I think he will have learned and will be ready to go and will finish off the shots. I think Levi. I feel really good about Levi's chances. Let me put it that way of rolling here at the World Team Trials.
Well, and this isn't going to be a direct rematch either. It's not that I need to point it out to anybody watching and listening to this, but it is freestyle versus folk style. We saw the folk style version of Haines versus Hamiti. Now we're seeing them. Hey, it's primarily on their feet, so it is about offense, and how do you defend those shots on your feet, because I think Haines, if I had to say, he's just riding position, that's arguably in my mind one of his best attributes, but that's not there in folk style.
Right.
Or that is there more so in folk style than freestyle.
Yeah. No, I think again, I think it'll be a fun match if we see it, and I think and hope that we will. And again, I think Levi we'll figure out a way to finish off the takedowns.
Hi there again. Another brief disclaimer, as this conversation was recorded before the preseasons were released, and Jacob Cardenas has withdrawn his name as well. So the matchup that you might be anticipating of Josh Barr versus Jacob Cardenas, as we were, is not ultimately happening. It's an insightful part of the conversation again, but not in the context of what's actually going to go down this weekend. Feel free to listen and enjoy it, or feel free to skip, as a timestamp will be provided down below. 92 kilos. Based on the pre-seed projections from Flow Wrestling, Josh Barr would be number 1. Jacob Cardenas would be number 2. So there we go. Another potential crash course there. But I've been extremely impressed with Aiden Sinclair. I thought the way that Sinclair wrestled in both the U20 and the senior level US Open, the amount of matches, and I think that's good for somebody like Sinclair, who is a future face of NCAA wrestling as it is, but also a future potential face of freestyle as well. So getting as many matches as you can and really testing your stamina. And the way that he performed, I mean, Trent Hidley certainly dominated, but I'm not going to count out Sinclair here against the likes of Cardenas, even though I would favor Cardenas. I've become a fan of Sinclair in the process of watching him compete at U20s and at the senior level US Open. Dustin Plotz in here as well, but Barr, being the number 1 seed, would most likely avoid all of those wrestlers until the final. So that other side of the bracket, if everybody gets there, that's the thing. Cardenas, Sinclair, Plot, any of them could emerge on that side and happen to meet Barr in the championship. But for the sake of it, Cardenas and Barr both on the. I also find it interesting that Barr is wrestling up a weight class at 92 kilos, really staying around the 197. 92 is 202 pounds, with the possibility that he could drop to 184 for next season. Again, it's not a guarantee, it's a possibility. I think it's an interesting discussion point going into next season, but he's not at 86. Kyle Dake and Carter Starocci are there, so maybe that slightly influences your decision, but he's also coming off of a season at 197 where he spent most of his time. So 92 kilos in the short term does make sense to me.
Yeah, I think it also makes sense. I mean, he's coming off a bit of an injury at the end of the season. And so, I think when you're trying to get yourself back to 100% physically, more difficult to do that if you're trying to make a weight drop at the same time. So I think all of those things factor in. I just think Josh Barr is such a unique talent, and truthfully, I think it's one of those things, and I think Carter might tell you the same thing, excuse me, in terms of what he learned in going through his injury a year ago. And Carter had obviously basically just one knee that he was working on. But what those injuries do for both of those guys is really force you to think about your positioning and how to prevent your opponents from scoring. And then obviously you got to figure out, all right, how can I also sneak in score or two of my own when I'm hampered in terms of what I can do. But that positioning part of it, I think could really help Josh here in terms of, all right, let's not put myself in a position, again, at NCAAs, he knew he just couldn't. If he did, it could be the end of the tournament. And he did a great job of it, of keeping himself out of positions that could put him in harm's way. And I just think that is an unintended benefit from having that injury. And now as you get fully healthy, just remembering, all right, I know how to make sure I don't get scored on. And Josh just has such a unique set of offensive skills. I think he's going to be very, very difficult to beat at the tournament here.
Barr did very well in this cycle a year ago at this time at U20. Yeah. He was a runner-up. So now this is his first time at the senior level.
Yeah.
But he knows Cardenas very well. Again, that's still going to be a toss-up at the end of the day. We know what Barr brings to the mat each and every time. Cardenas, any of these guys can give him a fight. Again, and it's no guarantee that Cardenas gets there. I like what I saw out of St. Clair. I think Dustin Plott is somewhat of a wild card there. I think David Taylor will get him right. So 92 kilos. This one quietly could be one of the more entertaining weight classes out. 65 kilos out there. Nobody can hold a candle to that group. We'll finish up with this. Aaron Brooks isn't competing, which I think is a surprise to most people. Greg Kerkvliet is a simple answer. He just had leg surgery, unfortunately dealt with an injury right before NCAAs, and that's going to be a long-term recovery. So obviously you and I wish him the best. And I think people who didn't know about that would join us as well. Kerkvliet still has a bright future in the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club once he's fully 100%. Aaron Brooks, though, is a little more intriguing. There's rumors floating around that he's dealing with an injury. I can't speak to that either. I do think this is when there are some open spots available, especially at 92 kilos. You know, he wrestled at 86. 92 wouldn't be that. I just think it's a missed opportunity for him, but I'm not going to fault him. He can make it whatever decision he wants. I just enjoy watching Aaron Brooks wrestle, so that's what I'm disappointed about.
Yeah, no, and I think wrestling fans, you want to see the guys that you know are the best, but at this stage of his career and life, I think he wants to make sure he's fully healthy, fully ready to go, and able to compete the way he wants to compete. And if he doesn't feel he's able to do that, obviously, certainly within his rights, but probably for his long-term prospects, that's the right thing to do. So, Aaron is certainly going to be a force for years to come on the USA wrestling scene. As always, anytime there's an individual who can't compete for whatever reason or isn't competing for whatever reason, it does open up other opportunities, and it's always intriguing to see who will take advantage of those opportunities. And I think, one of the nice things right now for USA wrestling is the depth. We talk about Penn State's depth on its wrestling team a lot, and the importance of that. And building a championship caliber team. The depth on this USA wrestling squad, Zach, is really getting kind of crazy. And it's obviously great for the sport, but it is why I think USA wrestling is in the midst of what will be looked at as its golden era. I mean, there have been some very good teams, very good individuals, obviously, historically great individuals over the many years. But this last couple of Olympic cycles, and I think looking ahead to the next couple anyway, it's going to be hard to top what from the United States perspective, what Team USA is putting out there, because again, just look at these tournaments. Whoever comes out on top at Final X, again, they will have prevailed against some outstanding competition at any of the weights, and I think the U.S. will have wrestlers that can compete. At least for medals, if not for gold across the board. Again, it doesn't guarantee that they're all going to get medals, but they will have competitors out there that I think you should feel pretty confident can certainly bring home at least a medal at each of the weight classes.
That is the goal of all of this. I certainly have that same type of confidence. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions, previewing the World Team Trials. Plenty more conversations on the way with Final X going on in June too. Thank you so much to each and every one of you for checking out this episode. Friendly reminder, let us know your thoughts down in the comments section. And if you are not already, become an everyday or subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Down in the description will be links to Jeff's work outside of wrestling. I highly encourage you to go check them out. Big thank you to you, Jeff. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Really appreciate the conversation and can't wait for the next time that we get to catch up about Penn State wrestling and the Nittany Lion Wrestling Club, especially with all the action that's going on here in May and June.
Yep, my pleasure. Thanks, Zach.